Jason, you can start. Vice Admiral Puneet Kumar Bail, Ati Vishesh Seva Medal, Commandant, Indian Naval Academy. Flag officers, commanding officers, senior officers, professorial cadre officers, midshipmen of 105 INSE, officer trainees, ladies and gentlemen. I, Midshipman Suryansh, have the privilege to introduce the distinguished guest speaker for the evening, Commodore M. Doraibabu, Nausena Medal, Gallantry. His lecture today would be in two sessions. In the first session, the speaker is going to shed light on the topic Lesser Known Pereira and Life Lessons. In the later part, he would be speaking regarding his latest history book of the Indian Navy, A Decade of Transformation, Signaling Power and Partnerships, 2011-2021. The Indian Naval Academy is the veritable cradle of naval leadership. At this esteemed institution, we, the officer trainees, imbibe values and lessons to become adept leaders of the future, and what better way than to study the life journey of late Admiral Ronald Linsdale Pereira, who is amongst the renowned leaders not only of the Indian Navy, but of our nation as well. Commodore M. Doraibabu was commissioned on 1st July 1997 in the executive cadre of Indian Navy. A specialist in communications and electronic warfare, he is an alumnus of Defence Services Staff College, Wellington, and completed higher command from College of Air Warfare, Secunderabad. He was awarded the Nausena Medal Gallantry on 15th August 2005 for a rescue operation and outstanding contribution in the 2004 tsunami relief operations in the Andaman and Nicobar Islands. He has commanded Indian naval ships Kakinada, Sudarshini and Sukanya. The speaker is an accomplished author. Besides authoring latest history book of the Indian Navy, he has also authored a coffee table book on INS Sudarshini's epic Asian voyage, tracing the 18th century trade routes in 2012-13. He has edited all the 3 International Fleet Review 2016 coffee table books, collaborated with Amar Chitrakatha to bring out 3 illustrated books on the maritime history of India and the Indian Navy, and contributed to the previous history book of the Indian Navy, Blue Waters Ahoy. Presently, the officer is posted at Maritime History Society as Additional Director, coordinating the Navy Gallery being established at the National Maritime Heritage Complex project coming up at Lothal, Gujarat. Without further ado, may I now request the speaker to deliver his address. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Suryansh, for the warm introduction and the welcome. Vice Admiral P.K. Bail, Commandant INA, Rear Admiral A.D. Theophilus, Deputy Commandant, Rear Admiral Rajveer Singh, Principal, officers, distinguished faculty, cadets, ladies and gentlemen. A heartfelt thank you to each and everyone here, firstly, for the privilege of letting me stand before you, and secondly, for making time from a jam-packed schedule that's probably been planned months in advance. Before I start, I would like to check if the last row cadets there, can you hear me? Raise your hands, please. Okay, I was not exactly checking the audio system. I just wanted to see if you've already slept off. I believe you've had a cross country in the morning, so I know what it's like to be in the grind. And with the permission of the Admiral, in case anybody is sleepy, please do stand up. I would rather have you standing up and listen to the lecture rather than nod your head off and break it on the front seat. I was exactly in these seats 30 years ago to the date. I'm from the 52nd Naval Academy course, joined in 1993 July as a first termer. Admiral Rajveer Singh here was my instructor then and in later stages. I pray that he excuses me of my follies during the talk and not march me off to the TCOM. Many of us here would have heard of Field Marshal Manekshaw even before we joined the academy or the services. Such were the legends of that man. An equally legendary figure was Admiral R.L. Pereira, the 9th Chief of the Naval Staff, a colossus who inspired a few thousand of officers and sailors, who in turn inspired many more. During the course of the talk, I would be speaking on the lesser known personal attributes of Admiral Ronnie P., as he was fondly known. Looking at the wide spectrum of the audience here, from cadets to admirals, please allow me to ramble on stories relating to both ends of the spectrum sitting here. Also, senior officers, please excuse me when I refer to the Admiral as Ronnie P. sometimes. It's not in disrespect to the icon, but that's the way he was more colloquially known. Admiral Ronnie came from a large, devout Christian family of Portuguese and Armenian descent. Good family values and upbringing was in the genes. The first circle of men in his family all had military service. His father was a major in the Indian Medical Department and served once as the superintendent of the Hazaribagh Central Jail. The father's compassionate handling of Indian political prisoners in the 1930s and the 40s came back as good karma to Admiral Pereira 4 decades later, but that's another story. A little while ago, I was at the NDA, and while I was walking around in the hallowed grounds, I could not but help think of military greats, past and present, icons who used to run, march, roll, and frog jump there. The NDA was where then Commodore R.L. Pereira made an indelible impression on young cadets of the 43rd to the 49th course NDA between 1971 and 73. Admiral Ronnie P., as the DEPCOM, was omnipotent and omnipresent. DEPCOMs of academies are only to be known and not seen much. But here was a DEPCOM who could appear anywhere, catching cadets slouching on the roads, sleeping in the classes, up to no good in the squadron, anywhere, and he distributed restrictions and punishments like toffees at Christmas. If you've all heard stories of the singered hike at NDA, Admiral Pereira started the punishment hike during his time. The singered hike, a march of about 14 kilometers to a height of almost 4,000 feet, has been discontinued now. Ronnie P. would punish cadets with the hike, but to the cadets' surprise, he would sometimes accompany them on the hike, joking and priming the cadets with discussions. At the end of the hike, the cadets would find fresh lime juice, cupcakes, and sandwiches waiting for them. What better? Admiral Pereira's thought was to make the cadets realize their mistakes and not consider their punishments as a begrudgment against the person awarding it. A lesson here for the divorce on squaddies. As one of the cadets said in his biography of the Admiral by Brigadier Mike Balla, one would seldom set eye on the DEPCOM except for functions or addresses. Even lesser chance of the DEPCOM would ever set eyes on a particular cadet. But Ronnie made it clear that he was part of the academy curriculum. Through day and night, he was going to live the academy life with the same ferocity he was determined to make us live. He was determined to be God and Godfather to each one of 1,500 cadets and make them the finest and fittest humans on earth. He was like lightning, can strike anytime, anyone. He would attend morning musters with the specific intention of checking on six-termers who would generally not attend the muster. Like a whirlwind, he would come in, march into the squadron, go into the cabins of six-termers, and all you would see were flying tabs and stripes as he detabbed them one by one. Appointments were actually wary of the screech of his car coming and stopping in front of the squadrons. And this would continue throughout the day when he would walk into classes, the PT ground, the drill square. He cared for the cadets in equal measure, but would brook no nonsense from them too. He would never demean anyone, either a cadet or any person, throughout his career and afterwards. That was an endearing trait of his. He had a special liking for panga takers. He would say, if you escape, it's your luck. But if you're caught, face the consequences like a man. So an incident. He walked into a squadron on surprise rounds during training periods when the rest of the academy was in the training block. One particular six-termer was bunking class. The moment he heard the DEPCOM's car stop in front of the squadron, he started to panic. But we've all been selected for our quick thinking. So he immediately hit upon a brainwave. He quickly donned a dirty t-shirt and went into the corridor and started polishing a pair of shoes in the next game, impersonating a civilian bearer. The DEPCOM first crossed him. He just walked past him in the corridor, and just when the cadet took a breath of relief, he turned around and marched back and shouted, "You think you can outsmart me?" The cadet mumbled something, and the DEPCOM said, "I like your quick thinking. I'll not march you up. Take 21-4. That was his code for 21 restrictions and 4 single hikes. The minimum he would disburse anytime. I guess he was fair and just after all. He expected the senior cadets to be exemplary models for the junior cadets. For example, if a senior was punishing his junior, the senior himself should be properly attired and not in casual dress like gowns or shorts. And he, by personal example, practiced this dictum meticulously, as it was evident when sometimes he would punish certain cadets to report at his house on Patti Parade during the night. And the cadets at all times would be surprised to see him turned out smartly in uniform and never in casual clothes. He said, "Always be in uniform when you have to punish someone. Uniform gives you the authority. Without it, you are nobody." A good lesson for all of us. So another story, the costliest sugarcane juice by a cadet Anil Garg, who later retired from the army as a colonel. So Admiral Pereira ordered the entire academy to watch a movie, Pattern, on a World War II hero in Pune city, for which he booked an entire theatre. The entire academy, he ordered, would be moving on cycles in squads, and he made arrangements with the local traffic, the police, that the whole academy would move smartly, go to the theatre, come back, and he specifically ordered no one would break lines or break the squads. Discipline was one of the hallmarks that he wanted. The entire academy moved a distance of almost 40 to 45 kilometers to the city and back on their cycles and squads. But then there's always one lot. So on return, one of the tail end squads chanced upon a sugarcane vending booth, a stall. So they said, a hot day, long cycling, let's have a juice before anybody notices us. And they stopped. They had their first round, which cadet is happy with just one. So they ordered the second one. And now in those days, there were no mechanical sugarcane juice crushers. It was all manual. And so the vendor was taking his time to take out the second round of glasses. You know, these squads were squads of 12. And as he was taking it, and the cadets took the glasses in their hand, and before they could sip the second and cool sugarcane juice, whoosh, one car came, stopped, out jumped the DEPCOM, and he shouted, "What are you guys doing here? I thought I particularly ordered nobody will break the squads." Before the cadets could even stand up and think, he awarded them all 21-4, and he jumped into the car and moved off. And the cadets were just flabbergasted watching. Under a minute, the car came back in reverse and said, "That's not enough for you guys. The moment you cross the Pashan gate, which is the entry into NDA, lift your cycles on your shoulders and reach your squads." I don't think so any of the cadets would ever forget that. Admiral Ronnie was genuinely interested in the welfare of his cadets, and all he wanted was to make them the best officers in the armed forces and thorough gentlemen. He and his wife, Mrs. Phyllis Pereira, were childless, and they considered every cadet as their son. But that did not make Ronnie P. excuse anyone if a mistake was committed. His fair and just methods of dealing with the cadets left an impression on them, and they followed his maxims even when they later commanded huge organizations. From his batch of trainees, there were at least 4 chiefs of armed forces: General Dalbir Singh, Air Marshal Raha, Admiral Robin Dhawan. On one occasion, he sighted a cadet out of a squad, and before he could reach the cadet and distribute his toffees, the cadet ran around and mixed up into another squad. On being asked to follow, the cadet did not, and the others, maintaining the sacred bond of not giving away their mates, also did not name the erring cadet. Understanding this, he awarded the squad of 6 to 20 single hikes to be divided between themselves equally. So do the maths, there were 6 cadets and he's awarded them 20. So naturally the cadets divided 3 each amongst themselves and gave the remaining 2 to the errant cadet, and he was caught. Even though the Admiral had his favorites amongst the cadets, one being Mike Balla, who was almost like his adopted son and also wrote the biography, The Admiral I Knew, he never showed any favoritism. So one particular incident was when Mike Balla was recommended for a blazer in hockey, and when the recommendations went to the DEPCOM, he downgraded the blazer to a blue. And he explained to Mike Balla that it should never be pointed at you that you were a favorite of mine and that's why you were given a blazer. Being the favorites also has its pitfalls. Another important contribution that Ronnie made at the Academy was of organizing the very first NDA ball, akin to the well-known annual Navy ball traditionally held the DEPCON decided to organize a similar ball in the academy to soften the rough edges acquired by the cadets, which is followed to this date and is a sought-after event for young ladies at Pune. For all his efforts and his interest, the NDA has dedicated a special place for Admiral Pereira for eternity in the form of the training ship Ronnie Pereira, docked at the Academy's Peacock Bay. He held a special place for the cadets he trained, for transforming them from rough teenagers into morally responsible men. Now let's talk a bit about the other career paths of Admiral Pereira's life and lessons that can be imbibed from them. Admiral Pereira joined the Royal Indian Navy Reserve, RINR, on his 20th birthday. He initially wanted to join the army, but I suppose better sense prevailed and he chose the Navy. That was in the lighter vein. To see it contextually, the officers commissioned in the World War years immediately saw action, and a little after the end of the war were handed over a fledgling Navy and given the task of developing it into what we are today and more. We were a motley bunch of 33 ships, of which there were about 3 frigates, and mostly we had motor launchers, minesweepers, and even trawlers given to us when the British left. These officers who developed it later were visionaries. All of us need role models in our careers as we grow. Some of these officers are worth emulating as role models. While Admiral Ronnie P. is largely remembered for his leadership qualities, ethics, honor, courage, austerity, amongst others, he also, like all humans, had his imperfections. For one thing, a lesser-known fact was that he was not a topper or a front-runner of his course. In fact, during his midshipman time, he failed his signals course and had to repeat it. His instructor remarked, "A good type of midshipman who is keen and seems intelligent. He has worked hard but did not do as well as was expected of him." Another instructor found Ronnie's power of command poor. Now, Ronnie was a gunnery officer later and the CNS, of course. Even as the commanding officer of the erstwhile INS Delhi, a cruiser, he was ruthlessly critical of his own ship handling. After every evolution or ship handling coming alongside casting off, he would record the same in a notebook. And even more is that he circulated it amongst the officers in the wardroom to see if they could learn or they could advise him how he could do better the next time. Issues like these in the present Navy would not see too many promotions. But the Admiral too did not make the first cut to be selected to the rank of captain. He made it in the second week. He was always certain that every promotion he got was the last he would get, as told to Brigadier Mike Bella. A takeaway here is to do one's work with complete sincerity and perseverance of purpose, rather than the rewards it would get. The rewards would follow by themselves when due. Another widely known trait of his was his explosive anger. But then his anger was never unjustified and never lasted long. There was this incident, another story, when he was the CNC South. So he came outside his house late at night for a smoke, a vice he picked up at the age of 14. He found the armed sentry outside his house sleeping. So he quietly took away the sentry's rifle and went inside. The next morning he heard a commotion outside, and when he stepped out, the sentry was explaining to the flag lieutenant 4 masked men came in a boat, climbed out of the river, overpowered him and took away his rifle. The Admiral naturally exploded and wanted the strictest action for dereliction of duty, malingering and lying, charges which could have had the sailor thrown out of the Navy. Later on, he was told that the sailor was the only breadwinner of the family. His soft corner took over, and due to the mitigating circumstances of the sailor, he simply awarded him number 12, stoppage of leave for 2 weeks, and a strict admonition. The human touch in his interactions with all, irrespective of rank and status, endeared him to one and all. While this showed his compassionate side, he was not so with everyone. During his tenure as the CNC West, the high-rise buildings which you see in the picture, only the married officers would know those, and you soon would know it, of Navy Nagar and Nofra were coming up under his time. The civilian contractors were unduly delaying the project, and when questioned, the garrison engineer of the MES said they were not listening to him as they had high contacts in the government. So basically the resources which were required as cranes, trucks, cement were not coming in time, since those were being siphoned off to other places. So he called the contractors to his office and showed his infamous wrath. He said, quote, "Ladies could excuse me, I will kick your bloody backsides till you bleed through your noses." Not exactly what one would expect a CNC to say, but nevertheless, it brought in instant results and had the right effect. The next time he went on rounds, the buildings were coming up at a faster pace than they would normally be. The takeaway here would be that while any officer is expected to hold his or her tempestuous behavior, in some places and situations, it warrants a justifiable letting off of the steam. But no decisions need to be taken unless one is in a balanced state of mind. Admiral Pereira was a gunnery specialist, I said earlier. He completed his specialization at UK, as was the norm those days, in 1948. Once he completed the course, he was raring for a gunnery billet at sea. But to his dismay, he found that he had been appointed as a staff officer in a staff billet in the headquarters West Coast. He didn't like it, and not to take things lying down, saying, "They have appointed me, I will go and do." He shot off a letter to Commodore Inigo Jones, the Commodore in charge Bombay at that time, stating, "I feel I shall lose complete touch with the subject if my knowledge is not now put to practical use after my recent specialization in England. My present post offers no facilities for this." Realizing the young officer's predicament, his grievance was addressed, and he was appointed as the GO of HMIS Jamna, where he established himself as a strict, no-nonsense gunnery officer and did exemplarily well. Two things. An organization should choose the correct person for the correct job, and an officer should know his own capabilities and opt to do the best he could and he can for the service. Another vital characteristic of the Admiral was his trait of being smartly turned out and well groomed. He laid a lot of importance to military bearing. This was the influence he garnered from his father and great-grandfather, both military personnel. So another story. On one occasion when he was the Cmde West, he was witnessing a game of basketball at Goa, teamed by officers and sailors. He noticed a few of the team members were sporting unduly long hair. Considering he was the chief guest there, he stopped the game immediately, ordered the team out of the court, told them to go and take a haircut and come back. And while he waited, they all went, got a fresh crew cut, came back, and then resumed the game. Such was his eccentricity for being well groomed. Pride in uniform and a good military bearing are the first visible hallmarks of an officer, and they are not to be trifled with. Being ethical. As the CNS, the Admiral once was on his way to meet the Prime Minister, then Prime Minister of India, Mrs. Indira Gandhi. While on his way, he spotted a youth on the road carrying an old man on his back. Seeing that, he stopped his car, got down and asked what happened. So the youth said, "My father is sick and I do not have the money for transporting him to a hospital, so I'm carrying him." Such was the compassion of this man. He bundled them both into his staff car and took them straight to AIMS in a hospital in New Delhi. And there, the 6'2" ramrod straight Admiral shouted at the staff, said, "Somebody attend to this man. He is a relative of mine. Take good care of him. I'll be back." And he marched off. He reached his appointment with the Prime Minister 15 minutes late. And this was at a time when the governance and the bureaucrats would be very wary of Mrs. Indira Gandhi's wrath when they did not do as she did. But he did what he felt was right without regard to consequences. This is a lesson for us both in courage and in compassion for fellow beings. Being revered by the men one commands is an endearing virtue. His men would do anything for Ronnie. So the picture here shows the fleet regatta, something which is not happening, and I'm not sure if the DK 27-foot wooden whalers are still in go. They are still there in NDA. You had these heavy boats, cumbersome, and 14 feet long wooden oars with which you pulled. And the regatta was a race where the pride of honor, a cockship, would be declared with the one who wins the maximum races. So he was commanding Delhi, and his senior sailor's boat participated, went through the race, and won it. You know, the race is, it's like a very tough pulling competition where one race everybody puts in whatever they have to complete the stretch. So after winning, sadly the team was told that you participated in the wrong race and you will have to participate again in the next race, which was in 10 minutes. The sailors were tired. The CO, Admiral Pereira, then came and told them, "Gentlemen, I can't ask you for much more, but the honor of INS Delhi is in your hands." The men participated and rowed like demons, and they won again. Admiral Pereira just had tears in his eyes when he saw the respect his men had for him. Coming to that, I would talk of a personal incident here. This was in 2014 when Cyclone Hudhud, a very severe cyclone, straight bang on hit Visakhapatnam. 2015, I'm sorry, 14 end, October. All ships were in harbour. The fleet commander had just changed. I was the only ship, Sukanya, out at sea. I was given a task of reaching Kochi and towing INS Tarasa, which we were gifting to Seychelles, a national event, so there could be no delays. So I was caught right in the storm for almost 2 days. I saw winds up to about 130 kilometers per hour. I had never noticed such strong winds before, after that many years in service. In fact, when I first saw the anemometer, wind anemometer showing about 70 knots, I called my electrical officer and I said, we just left harbor and your anemometer is not yet functioning properly. He said, no sir, it's functioning properly. We just removed that and put a fresh one. And that showed 80 knots. And I knew something was wrong. You know, I couldn't get out of the bridge. The pressure had dropped so much outside that the bridge doors were almost sealed shut. So I ran down, came up through the quarterdeck, and then I could hear the roar of the wind in my ears. And I came back. I tried communicating back with Vizag headquarters, no communications, not on any circuit, SATCOM, our own satellite communication, nothing. I pressed on. I said I've got a mission and used the best seamanship that I was taught, kept the ship safe and pressed on and reached Cochin. I asked the headquarters there, any word from Vizag? They said no, they are completely cut off, not even a telephone line is there. There's no electricity in Vizag. So at that time I went back to the ship and mustered all my men, cleared lower decks and said, all married men here with families, I don't know what's happening back at Vizag. If any one of you wants to head back and look after your families, please fall out. Not one sailor moved. I repeated again, please take leave, go back, attend to your families. The sailing we will do. The Master Chief Bosun just stepped up and said, sir, you take care of the families back home, we will come with you. That was one of the few times I felt the weight of my responsibility as an officer, as a leader. I sent one of my officers immediately to Vizag and said, please attend to every need of the families back there, irrespective of the cost and effort. We went on, we reached Seychelles. Somewhere after 10 days, the first communication was made to us that the families are still okay. A lot of damage, but they are okay. A sortie which I was supposed to go for about 17 days to Seychelles, drop the ship and come back, finally turned out to be 88-day sortie. I left in October just when the cyclone struck. I came back in December, visiting multiple places for multiple tasks. The crux here is when one has the right leadership qualities, the men and women under you will do whatever needed to hold up the person that they respect. The Admiral was fitted with a moral compass that would uncompromisingly point to the right direction. Courage of conviction, upright, and he brooked no nonsense and chastened defaulters with no favoritism, with the clear intention of correcting the wrong and setting high standards. So there was this incident of one Captain Madan Chopra, the Director of Material Services then. I don't know how many of you would even know of the story. In 1978, there was this infamous criminal duo, Ranga and Dilla. Many movies also were made on them. So there was this day when the children of Captain Madan Chopra were going to All India radio station to record them singing. They were very talented singers, a girl and a boy, young children. So they stepped out of their house, and because of lack of transport at that time, They come for a ride. Unfortunately, the person who gave the ride were these two in a car, which they had broken the handles from inside so that somebody once inside cannot go out. They kidnapped the children, took them off, brutally raped, and finally murdered the girl and then the boy. By evening, when they did not return, Captain Madan Chopra launched a search, went to the police. Matter reached Admiral Pereira. He called up the commissioner and he said, please put your best man on this. I want the children found. Very sadly, the children were found, or rather their bodies, after 3 days. And the nature of the crime was so bad that it was splashed all over the media. In those days, media meant radio and the newspapers. And the parents went through a very horrible time. They were tormented by constant publication and bringing up the thing all across India. So after a few months, Captain Madan Chopra went and he contacted the NA of the CNS and said, I want an audience with the Admiral. And he was granted an audience. And he said, sir, I cannot bear to stay in India any longer because of the constant reminder of my children which the media keeps putting up. So Admiral asked, what do you want? He said, please post me somewhere abroad. I will do my best wherever you post me. Without a second thought, the Admiral picked up his phone, called up the Chief of Personnel and said, what's the next abroad posting that is coming up? He said, so we have a defense attaché in Paris coming up. He said, post Captain Madan Chopra there. So the COP then was the late Vice Admiral M.P. Awati. He said, but sir, he's a logistics officer and this billet is for an executive officer. So the Admiral said, so be it. Change the rules if need be, but post him there. Please imagine if these were your children, how you would have felt. And that's the way I want you to treat Madan. And he was posted there. People for whom he did services would gladly do anything for him. Ronnie P's compassion and caring for those that served under him was paramount, and for that he earned their undying admiration and reverence across all ranks. While rules are made to cover general conditions, special instances need an application of mind and a just heart to cater for needs of the personnel. As long as the good of the service is in mind, things can be viewed with a good eye and a just heart. Winding down, Admiral Ronald Linsdale Pereira was the stereotypical people's person. Then Lieutenant Commander and now retired Rear Admiral Srikhande wrote in his condolence letter to Mrs. Phyllis, "The iron has lost its finest chief we've ever had." Admiral Arun Prakash, former CNS, says, "In a world of slipping ethical standards, where our young people desperately seek role models, Ronnie P has stood out as an iconic figure of impeccable integrity for generations of naval officers." While quaked in the knowledge that any hint of wrongdoing would invoke the Admiral's messianic wrath, the kindness and compassion he and Phyllis Pereira so often showed earned them the Navy's lasting love and admiration. There are two eminently readable biographies on the Admiral, one by Commander Anup Thomas, written under the tutelage of Commodore Ramtao Mukherjee, your PD training, and one by Brigadier Mike Balla. I was also part of a team writing the illustrated book with Amar Chitrakatha, where we have written about the Admiral. After having talked on his personal traits and leadership qualities, he was also instrumental in many advancements in the Navy. The first computer in the Navy was brought in Naval Dockyard, Mumbai, for a princely sum of 44 lakhs at that time. That computer was the cynosure of attention in the whole of Bombay. The first project they did was to put the payroll of the dockyard's personnel on the computer so that it would automatically generate. And today, of course, we are a very networked and capable Navy. The APSO sonar system, APSO stands for the Advanced Panoramic Sonar Hull Mounted, was one of his key achievements. In 71 war, we were experimenting with a good sonar, and till then sonar technology was still brought in from outside. So he directed one later Commodore Arokya Paulraj to collaborate with NSTL and come out with a sonar. After years of perseverance, many trials, tribulations and tests, we came out with this APSO, which today also is fitted on ships, of course, better versions and higher capabilities. He also set up the Weapon Analysis Unit. There's this unit which analyzes the chutes of ships on guns or missiles as to how good or how bad or how off mark they are. So he set this up, saying, we cannot sit on our laurels that we can shoot. We need to find out if we can shoot accurately. Ordnance on target, something the WOW is still functioning till today. Entitled rations, we still follow it. People at that time said we should take money in lieu of the entitled rations that we are getting. The foresightedness of the Admiral was such that he calculated inflation and said what we are going to take as money today in 5 years' time would not be of any value. Let's keep it in kind. So despite objections on the file, what we need to do, he gave a directive that we will take the rations and not the money. Something which is followed till date. We get our entitled rations. Another start of his was the Navy Children's School. He was the one who started, earlier it would be called the Navy Public School, now called the Navy Children's School. He started, he said, let's start our own chain of schools for our own personnel. Since we are on a transferable job, let them not go seeking admissions for their wards in various schools. And he started, and today we have some of the finest schools, the Navy Children's Schools in India. All these advancements which he had started are still in vogue today. Finally, one can say Admiral Pereira retired with nothing but an old Lambretta scooter. But that we are all gathered here talking about the man is testimony that he left with much more than he could have imagined. He stands as a colossus amongst legends. Even after retirement, he had but one house in Bangalore, which he had built with his savings. And after some time, he wanted to sell the house so that he could move to Kunu, Wellington near Ooty. His only condition was that he would accept the payment in fully white, no black, no underhand, everything what he had asked for. People said, you're a fool. If you sell it in part in black and part in white, you'll get much more than what you are, expecting. He said, nothing doing. So the house stayed as it is without being sold for quite a long time, till finally he sold it at much lesser than the market rate. But he stood to his point that the house transaction would be above board. He moved to Pune to a much smaller house, stayed there, and after about 10 years from his retirement, he passed away. During his funeral, it was one of the largest gatherings of sailors, officers and civilians who stood there and mourned the man in his death. I have finished a little earlier, so Suryansh, you could take over. Thank you for the patience.